According to international law, the West Bank belongs to Israel. In this video, I'm going to explain why, and you will see it actually makes a lot of sense. But first, a short note on why I've never talked about this before. I've made dozens of videos about the Arab-Israeli conflict. I've talked about Gaza, I've talked about history, 1948, but the West Bank, I barely mention it. I've mentioned Wisconsin more than I've mentioned the West Bank. At the end of the video, I will explain why I keep bringing up Wisconsin. But the question is, why not the West Bank? Am I hiding something? No. The real reason I'm avoiding it is because of the war. And no, not the war in Gaza. I'm talking about the bigger, more important war. The war Israel is losing big time. The war for the narrative. In one sentence, the war for the narrative is the war over what people talk about. And if you're thinking the world talks about what matters, about the biggest issues, I will say this gently, you are being naive. The two biggest conflicts in the world right now are Yemen and Sudan. There is real famine there. Tens of thousands of children are dying. But have you seen even one big protest for them? Have you heard politicians speak out? Has any artist at a music festival called to stop the humanitarian crisis in Sudan or Yemen? Muslim communities in England and France don't seem to care much when Muslims kill tens of thousands of other Muslims in Yemen. I haven't seen American college students protesting for Sudanese lives. Those who determine the narrative, Qatar, Iran, Russia, and China, want the world to focus on the West Bank, on genocide, on Gaza. Because if we talk about that, no one talks about the truly urgent things. China's global takeover, the real genocide in the Middle East against Christians, the fact that almost every Muslim majority country is not a democracy. No one talks about Yemen or Sudan or Syria. 1.5 million people died in those three countries in the last decades. But on your social media feeds, it is Gaza and the West Bank. Now, if settlers had murdered tens of thousands of Arabs in the West Bank in recent years, I would say, fair enough, that deserves attention. But that's not the case. There is no proportion between what actually happens in the West Bank and the massive media coverage it gets. I don't kid myself. I know I can't control the narrative. I'm just a tour guide who happens to look pretty good for his age. But here is what I can do. Not play the game. If they accuse Israel of genocide and I respond, no, it is not a genocide, and then they say ethnic cleansing and I say, no, it is not ethnic cleansing, I'm playing their game. And what sticks in people's mind? Israel, genocide, ethnic cleansing, again and again and again. Now, there is one word that both my supporters and haters love to use. A word I don't like, hasbara. My supporters say, thank you for your hasbara. And my critic says, he's doing hasbara, Israel propaganda. But the literal meaning of hasbara in Hebrew is explaining. I'm explaining Israel. And I don't like that word. My kids in school can do hasbara explaining to their teachers when they are asked, why didn't you do your homework? I'm not doing hasbara. I'm not doing defense. I'm attacking. I spread the truth that many people try to avoid. I want people on the other side to say, everyone says the Jews stole land from the Arabs. But Oren says no one can name even one Jewish town built on stolen land before the Arabs started the war. Interesting. Or Oren shows that in Palestinian society, it is legal for a man to beat his wife, and most Palestinians want to jail or even execute gay people. Maybe I shouldn't support people who see women as property. That's the kind of thinking I want to trigger. But so many people ask about the West Bank, so it is time for a video. And before we dive into the legal and historical facts, remember this. When people say Israel occupied the West Bank, just ask a simple question. Occupied from whom? They won't have an answer. If they say Palestine, ask, When did this country exist? Who ruled it? What were its borders? They won't be able to answer because there was never a country called Palestine. The Palestinian people were invented in the 1960s. And if you think I'm wrong, great. Just bring me one quote from an Arab leader in 1948 who says, "We, the Palestinian people." Just one. If you find it, I will delete my entire channel. There was no Palestinian people 150 years ago, not in 1917, not in 1948. Everyone has the right to self-determination, but no one has the right to reinvent history. And that's where our story starts. In 1917, the Balfour Declaration was issued. That's a well-known moment when Britain recognized the Jewish right to a homeland in the land of Israel. Even before that, US President Woodrow Wilson gave his approval. And even earlier, and most people don't know this, France issued the Cambon Declaration, supporting Jewish immigration to the land. It didn't happen in a void. In the post-World War I period, the Ottoman, German, Russian, and Austro-Hungarian empires all collapsed. And in their place, nation-states were born, like Poland, Czechoslovakia, the Baltic states, Finland. Zionism is the Jewish national movement. So simple. And if you know even a little bit of history, you know the Jews are from Judea. These declarations are important. Imagine if today the US, Russia, and China recognize Kurdish independence. That would matter, even without legal force. But 3 years after Balfour, something happened that did have legal force. The San Remo Conference of 1920. At San Remo, the former Ottoman territory was divided between France and the United Kingdom. France and the United Kingdom got mandates to help create nation-state in the areas that were under the Ottoman Empire. And they did. Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, and Israel. Britain was given the mandate not to govern it for itself, but to help create a Jewish state. The Balfour Declaration was part of the mandate. This decision was confirmed by the League of Nations, the pre-UN international body. So yes, under international law, the mandate called for a Jewish state. That's legally binding. And again, the creation of Israel is no different than the creation of most countries in the Middle East. And as you will soon see, no different than the creation of most countries in the world. The mandate wasn't for Britain to take the land. It wasn't part of the British Empire. It was held in trust until the Jewish state could be established. And no, there was no mention of Palestinians because they didn't exist. But it did mention protecting minorities. And it is important to note, before Arab armies tried to destroy the Jews, no Jew or Brit expelled Arabs. In fact, under the British mandate, hundreds of thousands of Arabs immigrated to the land of Israel because the Jews and the British created jobs. But the Arabs refused any Jewish sovereignty. After World War II, the British were exhausted. They proposed a partition plan, one Jewish state, one Arab state. Not Palestinian, Arab. The Arabs said no and started a war to wipe out the Jews. Egypt invaded and took Gaza. Jordan, led by British officers, took what is now the West Bank. And by the way, 3 modern terms were invented only in recent decades: the Palestinian people, the West Bank, and the Kingdom of Jordan. When Israel was founded in 1948, its borders weren't finalized. The war ended with armistice lines, not peace treaties or official borders. And here is the thing: Egypt doesn't claim the Gaza Strip. Jordan doesn't claim the West Bank. So who does it belong to? Now I'm going to say the most complicated word in this video: uti possidetis iuris. It's a principle in international law that says a newly independent country keeps the same borders it had before gaining independence. And if you're thinking, wait, I've never heard this term, no worries. That's why I'm here for. Here is a question you probably never asked yourself. On what legal basis were the borders of Argentina, Armenia, the Congo, Jordan, Syria, Chile, and Peru determined. I could go on. Mexico, Mali, Zambia, Ecuador, Tanzania. Most modern countries outside of Europe had their borders set according to this principle, uti possidetis juris. Why? To avoid chaos, to prevent wars. And just like every other state that emerged from a former empire, Israel's borders were shaped by this principle too. The borders of the British Mandate are the legal borders of Israel, and the Mandate, a binding legal document recognized by the League of Nations, called for the establishment of a Jewish state in all of that territory, including the area that Jordan illegally occupied between 1948 and 1967. Now, maybe you are thinking, if that is true, how come I've never heard it before? And if you're right, why does the European Union and some newspapers call it occupied territory? They cite Article 49 of the Geneva Convention, which says the occupying power shall not deport or transfer parts of its own civilian population into territory it occupies. And to that I will say what I told you earlier. If Israel is an occupying power, who did it occupy it from? Such a simple question. Why does this international law, uti possidetis juris, which defines most of the world's borders, not apply to Israel? To me, it is simple. If this rule applies to the rest of the world, it should also apply to Israel. The West Bank, or as I prefer to call it by its indigenous and historical name, Judea and Samaria, belongs to Israel. And even if you disagree with that, the very least you can do is call it disputed territories. Why it is always illegal settlements in occupied territory. At minimum, just say disputed. That's accuracy. If you want to learn more about uti possidetis juris, I highly recommend Natasha Hausdorff's channel. She is an expert in international law. Some say her English is better than mine. I'm not so sure about that.
Of international law is critical if negotiations are going to have any chance of success, because you cannot negotiate in good faith when both the law and the history are being misrepresented to this extent.
So, what's the solution? To understand the solution, we need to understand the problem. And the problem was never that Jews refused an Arab state. More than 70% of the Mandate became an Arab state, Jordan. And even then, the UN offered to split the remaining land again and give another Arab state. But the Arabs said no, because the core of the problem is this. They won't accept Jewish sovereignty on any land, no matter how small. That's the truth. I will leave a link below to my latest video about the children of Gaza to help you better understand the society we're dealing with. That's the end of the first half. Why I don't talk about the West Bank. Now to the second half. Why I always talk about Wisconsin. People ask me all the time. To me, it is obvious. New York is New York. Texas is Texas. Massachusetts is uncomfortable to say. Idaho doesn't sound like a state. It sounds like a shout. Hey ho, Idaho. But Wisconsin, perfect. Like, say it with me. Wisconsin, perfect. If you have more questions about the West Bank or Wisconsin, drop them in the comments. However, I highly recommend that you watch a few of Natasha's videos first. She's amazing. My next video will be about why Free Palestine is actually a terrible idea. If you would like to be notified, simply click the little bell below. And thank you to all my supporters. You're the reason I keep going. See you in the next one. Yalla bye.